Persians a taste of ice strategy. And so at dawn, the hopeless Athenians drew the upper height of Athenian political.
Hi viewers, in this video, we are talking about the movie 300 Rise of an Empire. We will discuss the movie story, summarize the plot, and we will also talk about the budget and box office performance of this movie, as well as movie production details. So let's begin. I didn't bone up my ancient Greek history before seeing 2006 300, nor did I do so before seeing its new follow-up 300 Rise of an Empire. Not because I feel that such research is above my pay grade, but discuss no matter how much research the filmmakers might say went into their subsequent visions. I know that realism and or actual accuracy was secretly job one for them. That being they use caught I was ill, prepared for the fact that Rise of an Empire, which is not so much a sequel to 300 as a companion piece given that it depicts events that happens simultaneously to those depicted in 300. For example, the titular number of VC cut separates getting spoiler alert by a bunch of Persian of larger numbers opens with an action montage accompanied by maybe 20 minutes of Texopa's voiceover. Also seems, and for all that I did not get much of a sense of historical narrative for the movie. There's one Greek fellow, an Athenian, who believes in the experiment called documentary, and he wants his sapiens to back up him up as Persian spurred by possibly homosexual golden literally. Box series come to lay waste to his model city. They are coming by ship, and a navy is commanded by the golden boy sister. Artemisia, played by the sexually intimidating Eva Green, who's going full diamond glance here, only without the singing, and this naval commander, an unusual one by anybody's standards, is what intrigued and vexed by the Antonian, who goes by the name of Themistocles and is played by a stalwart. While the first 300, based on a graphic novel by Frank Miller, was relentlessly merely driven in a way that was both relentlessly homoerotic and belatedly homeopathic. The introduction, no doubt, historically incorrect of Green's character to the combat changed the sexual dynamic in a way that's property ridiculous and also kind of jaw-dropping. I hated the Zack Snyder directed 300 with a patience aside from its in-your-face hateful war-mongering sentiments and the aforementioned homophobia. The thing looked as if it had been shot through lenses that had been smeared with dog faces prior to each take. Rise of an Empire, directed by Noam, who also made Smart People, which clearly established his 3D action movie. Bonafille's Novate is entirely more engaging by dint of being absolutely impossible to take even a little bit seriously. The ruthlessness of Green's character is taken to extremes that melt media to the cheesiest cereal you can name, and it hands delicious. The rest of the film's over the topness is pretty purposeful as well. Every time our sword ships are battling Vader, the screen fills up with a lake's worth of sporting blood, to the extent that you really start hoping that one of the film's characters suffers prayer cut just to see what happened. Also, the color palette here is more expensive than is Sanders' original. In addition to dun, there's also a lot of blue, a dark grey, and lots of crimsons. Is there intelligent dialogue or anything actual emotionally stirring by my lights? No, but in terms of sheer bloody spectacle, 300 Rise of an Empire gets a lot of melee out of sheer venal. Spectral, just don't try to drive a history lesson from the movie. In a spontaneous opening voiceover, Lena had the cargo Wars of Death and War as a tidal wave of blood. A rare moment of understatement, as it turns out. What Harry fails to notice is the taxonomy of camp poised to thunder through this hack and slash spectacular, fearlessly reviving prehistoric singer like sees him. The heat of battle eventually turns the chaos to fun. This is epic cheese, feta from the gods and clearly proud of it. Based on Frank Miller's still in the work graphic novel, Rise of an Empire is not a follow-up, but a side sequel, set before, during, and after Sparta's last stand. This is the same war on another front, a maritime duel between Sullivan Stapleton is heroic Themistocles and Eva Green's psychotic Artemisia, who in sense of breathtaking seduces her rival with a pre-battle revenge shake. From the first naval campaign, it becomes clear that Zack Snyder's 300 is in comparison a model of restraint. The increase in scale results in a shift in genre. This is a superhero movie in a different joke. Noam Murro, a commercial director, sets the action remaining speed with great visual confidence but little personality. He is, for the sake of franchise continuity, a proxy cider connected to an intravenous drip of cider juice, sanitizing sense with billowing self-homo and gory overkill. This is an X generation of 300 in body count, style, size, and violence. 300 hyper style universe where the moon looks like the Dead Star and a Persian base like Murder on Sea is just asking for hyper-style performances. Yet in the main list, main world, imaginable it's Eva Green's film, elevating the art of scenery, chewing through devouring entire cities. Green's dominatrix Cleopatra is a grossly unchained creation. Artemisia is a full package made, motivated, flamboyant, and fond of collecting head like she is bringing the Gorsiers. As with its processor, Miller's words so effective on page are clunkily adopted into rousing monogloss cut Themistocles, then it would be not air, but visually there is a genuine 3D experience on after air. One that's both impressive and interactive. The 3D is immediately its sole ambitious in terms of depth, but that is a Garnations B movie and you will have a blast. Hollywood publicist Bumble Ward was once interviewed about her desire for action king Michael Bay to show his softer side. What he called the gay bay. The 300 movies are the nearest thing to the gay bay genre. This is sort of parallel to Zack Snyder's original 300, which was about the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC. This shows what happens around the same time when the Greek general Themistocles is battling the Persian naval forces commanded by the super sexy Artemisia. She is played with a good reel of forbidding, putting and stuttering by Eva Green, a performer who is becoming so eccentric she may be the Sarah Mills of her generation. Sander co-writes with God Josted Noam Murro tracks, and again it is based on a graphic novel by Frank Miller called Xerxes. Oddly, the character of Xerxes, played here and in the previous movie by Rodrigo Santoro, does not appear in the action much. It is really spiritual thought with the same moment of complete stillness, the same flowing Jim Bonis with the same digitally enhanced apps. Moro has a very tiresome habit whenever anyone gets stables or slashed, of switching suddenly to also so that the gout of blood can spray longitudinally across the screen. Lena has the film's best line, responding to the Themistocles is visit. You have come a long way to stroke your cock while you watch real men train. Some experiences are presumably worth the effort. The original 300, which I saw 7 years ago, almost to the day, this past Sunday to be exact, was a very important part of my life as filmmonger. Before I saw it, I went to the movie maybe half a dozen times as a year and almost invariably with my parents and sometimes a friend. But when I saw 300, I saw it with an audience full of my classmates. My father drove me and sat in the midst of us, lecturing my friends on the real battle of Thermopylae, and the film itself was amazing. Kinetic energy, nudity, blood and heroism, badass dialogue and a triumphant ending is the top of a heroic tragedy. It was a glorious night, save for a partial rewatch my sophomore years of college. I have never rewatched 300, maybe because I don't want to spoil the memory of that night, or maybe because at 24 I know I would not love it. I did at 17, and the film itself is less important than what followed it. Our devotion to Zack Snyder as a director, I think Watchmen is one of the most underrated films of the 2000 and an increasingly prolific life as a filmmonger. In 2008, I saw about 16 films in the theater. In 2013, I saw about 100. 300 was also very important to me because as a film my friends and I embarrassed, and as I later learned, a film that was not expected to make much impact at the box office and it proved to be massive hit. It felt like a success for us. The circumstances under which I saw rise of an empire were a deal less memorable. I went on a Tuesday evening by myself and I was a little on the tired side, having not fully adjusted to daylight savings time. But I went in expecting some unrelenting violent fun and a good evergreen performance. I left far wearier than when I came in. The problem with Rise of an Empire is basically this: it's never and enough to be ironically fun, and never good enough to be the lightweightly fun. It's just drab and boring, essentially competent in every department, but never proficient in any of them. It's a number experience. It's not a sequel to 300, but sort of side sequel. It encompasses the events of that film in its time frame, providing some prequel and a shade of sequel material. But mostly, it shows what the rest of Greece was up to while Leonidas and friends were having fun of Thermoscale civilian and its army ambushed the Persian forces at the Marathon, where the Themistocles kills the Persian king Yagal Nor, but lets his son live a mistake which haunts him in the form of this shitty movie. X-rays goaded him on by Darius, naval commander, becomes the melodramatic being that it was in 300, before which it just looked like some dude with a beard, and Artemisia, a Greek herself, who lost her family to and was sexually abused by Greek soldiers, decided to get her revenge on Greece once and for all and sets out the ships to destroy. But Themistocles is a formidable opponent and numerous battles ensures. Meanwhile, the 300 Spartans who declined to join the rest of Greece is fighting the Persian, make their own stand, are destroyed, and only at the end does the Spartan navy show up to join Themistocles and what remains of his troops in taking on, seemingly the whole of the Persian army. Just as the battle begins to, the film ends, presumably yet another film will finish it. I don't care much either way too. The film begins as Cargo realize the Spartans with the story of the conflict, and the heady deliveries of the speech is grimly lacking in flair of. There is a fine line between stoic and dull, and Harry lands on the wrong side of it. From his point on, the film builds on the battle and sprays of blood, and attempts a bite of political subtext with a subplot about the Themistocles' belief in the freedom and democracy. But where the original film was rousing and enthralling, this was heavy and heavy. Some of the blame must certainly fall on director Noam Murro. He fails to serve the film at same basic, hard to define level. I am not sure exactly how to put his failure into words, but there is just no juice to film. The shots are framed well enough, and the sense progress is a possibly coherent fashion, but I just never cared. I even started dozing off his points, so unengaged was I with the goings on. The acting does not really help either. None of the performances are truly bad. Themistocles' speeches are pretty well written, and Stapleton can't really do much with them. He never has the conviction that Belted brought to the Leonidas, and thought he conveys Themistocles' determinations and sincerity. He never gives a genuinely memorable performance. Eva Green has received a fair amount of praise for her work as Artemisia, and indeed, she is the film's MVP, but that's not really saying much. She falls back too much on her standard facial expressions, a sort of grim anti-smirk, and she enjoys some of the characters' more over the top moments. She kisses a sweat here to the one point. She never approached the camp height of her work in dark shadow. It was noting that the most effective scene in the film involves a probably a historical meeting between the Themistocles and Artemisia, trying to win him over to the Persian side, telling him they could conquer the world if they worked together. Artemisia and the Themistocles have a kind of rough sex, each trying to dominate the other, which ends with Themistocles refuses of Artemisia's offer and no satisfaction of it for either of them. Maybe I am just a prevent, but it was the only scene in the film that really came to life for me. The only scene where the characters real me really came to life and expressed their military ambitions in, shall we say, somewhat more human terms. The rest of the cast is barely worth of mention. Santoro has little of the presence he had in the original. Since this film presents Xerxes as essentially Artemisia's puppet, Hade is, as I mentioned, pretty lifeless, and the supporting cast hence as Themistocles' companion Aeschylus, Carlin Mulvey as his friend, Jack Connell as Salem's son Callisto, who defies his father and becomes a soldier, fares into a common grave. And again, none of them are notably poor, but none of them make any impact. Technically, it's mostly proficient, but it's also cut from the same cloth as the original, and just as everything else in display is a duller copy of that film. So it does not match that film for visual splendor. Simon Dogan's cinematography has all these styles, color, and slow motion you would expect, but is hardly worth getting excited about. Patrick Tatopol's productions designs is good, but we have seen this stuff before, and it's not really used to its best advantage. The special effects are mostly decent, but some of the CGI is fairly dog. The junky Excel score is there. Oh, and I might as well mention the script by Zack Snyder and Johnson based on Frank Miller graphic novel that I mentioned. I can't really give this film a low rating because it's not really bad. It's not good either. It's the epitome of a firm. From my childhood, Jason and at the new Beverly Cinema. This was the first film I would experience the movie on the big screen, and the impact, especially seeing it as part of double features along with Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, was striking. It was effects led action, adventure, popcorn fun, all style and spectacle in the best sense of the words. Just a couple of days later, I saw 300 Rise of an Empire, the sequel to the Zack Snyder's 2007 blockbuster sword and sandal comic book adaptation 300. And the truth is, there is no reason to love Jason and not love the 300 series as well, because they are cut from the same cloth and they are all great cinematic entertainments. The main difference being the 300 series has better acting, better attention to characters development, and frankly better stylizations and effects, all of which is most true of 300 Rise of an Empire, as well as getting the bar pretty dear high for the future cinematic arrival of Wonder Woman. But I will get to all that momentarily. First thing first, with the only other major release being the animated family film Mr. Peabody and Sherman 300. Rise of an Empire's only competition for the adult crowd and the younger reviewers likely to sneak into the theater for R-rated fare is the Liam Neeson action thriller non-stop in its second weekend, so the 300 sequel should enjoy a nice opening weekend, and I think it will get strong word of mouth from the audience it most needs to win over the because successful. Where things get triggered is in subsequent weeks, since its second weekend brings a strong competition from the video game adaptations Need for Speed, which has bonus pool in the form of Breaking Bad and alum Aaron Paul. Each weekend thereafter brings another actions oriented competitors targeting many of the same demographics 300. Rise of an Empire needs to be win. Those films are the sort likely to the hits overseas too. So also the foreign appetite for 3D Hollywood affects filled action movies will definitely factor big is any road to box office success. It will have to fight for its share of the pie and it will forgive the pun, rise or fall in the certain of audience reactions. With a budget north of $18 million dollars and probably closer to $100 million dollars and a marketing campaign that was eye-catching enough to suggest we can take on the usual 50% break even comes at somewhere in a neighborhood of $300 million dollars for simple quick calculations assume Saturdays get roughly half of the total ticket sales. This matters because even the badly reviewed Immortals, which was not sequel to the blockbuster and lacked any significant save power by 2011. Standard Seals has of course since become Superman, still pulled down $2 to $6 million in worldwide box office, having opened in November on the heels of the popular Tower Heist and facing a second weekend pull of Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 1. This is 300 sequel is opening in March, the same month in which the its predecessor opened and has all of the benefits of being a sequel to a name brand and destroying some recognizable faces. It's also getting decent advances buzz which is not only important for the obvious reasons but also because frankly a lot of people questioned whether this sequel even needed to be made and fear it would be a substandard attempt to just cash in one the brand. All of which is just to say that adjusting for inflation and a bump for being sequel to 300 plus a meter really release date should help it pass immortal totals. I think the tracking plus comparisons with last year's box office for the frame suggest Mr. Probity and Sherman will win the weekend, but 300 Rise of an Empire will take second place with a healthy 40 plus million domestic opening. There's come down from the first film's big $70.8 million opening, but plenty enough to help the film to 100 plus million dollar at the North American box office. And of course, this is a movie that will enjoy a healthy run on Blu-ray, DVD, and especially the surging digital has the profit margins for home entertainment and ridiculously high compared to the theatrical recipes. So filmmaking, perhaps 50% million dollar on home entertainment probably generates as much or more profit for the studio than is represented by $100 million at the box office. To oversimplify a bit but get the point across well enough. Even a simple break, even worldwide theatrical run will be enough to create the attention necessary for a good home entertainment run with likely total worldwide sales in the 100 plus million range. Now, if you are shaken by my comparison to the classic film Jason and the Argonauts and wondering what I mean about Wonder Woman having a lot to live up to now, let me explain further and give you an idea of what makes 300 Rise of an Empire so good. I think a lot of film critics and sci-fis will tell you Jason and the Argonauts is a wonderful motion picture, and it certainly is. They will note its storm and the amazing stop motion effects, and how its pace mostly keeps things moving right along from one action set piece to the next with judicious uses of a few bits of expositions and downtime in between, all of which is absolutely true. Yet somehow many of those same people might be equally quick to invest the 300 series has no business being compared to Jason and the Argonauts, that the modern movie is just all flash and no substance, that the CGI and other visual effects in 300 Rise of an Empire can't compare to the brilliance of Ray Harryhausen magnificent visual effects work and that they just don't make them like they used to. Well, there's a lot of honey. Jason and the Argonauts was not exactly dreaming with the characters' development beyond the most basic necessary elements to prove the people are alive. Beyond that, there is just not much happening on the personality front, nor is this story going to any great legend to be more than a framework on which to stage several action set pieces. It's bare bonus storytelling for the purpose of hosting cool visuals and action scenes like many similar wonderfully entertaining action adventure of the past. We need not engage in the pretense that somehow everything older than yesterday has value and charm just by nature of being older, and while we praise the genius of Harry Hassan work, I love everything he's done and his films are among my fondest cinematic memories. We should also recognize that nobody sitting in that new Beverly theater with the last week seriously thought the visual effects from the 1963 film were literally more realistic or looked better than modern visual effects work. We view it and consider its artistry not just for how it looks to use us in the here and now, but also in the context of when it was made and our awareness of the weight of that accomplishment and of the level of artistic attention required to create it. But we should also remind ourselves of why it was created and what is this from start to finish. Axlick satirized bite of filmmaking with little actual substance but plenty of visual to impress our eyeballs and make us munch our popcorn with a big smile. There is no less measure of artistry to modern visual effects, including the talent and time that goes into the creating great CGI effects. People who praise stop motion over CGI may as well as admit that there are people who could the non-stop motion as inferior to paintings and actual set designs used to accomplish visual effects in much older films. Older is not superior merely by virtue of being older and less technologically advanced. Regardless of what hipsters and your grandfather keep insisting, and while obviously there are every varying degrees of quality that arise from various degrees of talent, of time, energy expended to product visual effects. The next time someone tells me CGI is not impressive or as artistically valid or details oriented as stop motion effects, I am going to point them to the gravity and explain to them why they should stop talking. Obviously, CGI is complex and can in many instances be beautiful, amazing, and require a great deal of artistic talent and energy, such is the case of 300 Rise of Empire. The effects are used here to do much larger world building than it in the first film, and they achieve terrific results. It is visually more impressive than the first film in terms of the breadth of the world and how they apply this style and imaginary to very different settings is trim out. Think of the armies fighting in 300 and then imagine that same approach and style applied to brutally violent naval battles. Imagine it applied to a three-dimensional Persian city where you are pretty drawn on a throng of thousands of cheering worshippers of their god king as he is perched dazzling high above. There are still the epic bare-chested hand-to-hand combat sequences, don't worry, a lot of them in fact, but there is much more happening now than just a small army fighting bigger, more elaborately dressed army. And that much more happening is not limited to styles, fighting sequences, and amazing visual effects. It expands to the plot and to the character arcs. We got not one, not two, not even three characters with some semblance of personality and ideas and arcs, but rather at least six characters with the personal stories that have well defined arc feeding the film's main themes. events and the another arcs and the asides from a new series that go way over the top. Most of the performers deliver pretty solid depictions of these characters and manage to give them more emotional range and than the story frankly required. Yet it is violent to an extreme level, far exceeding the graphic violence of the first film, as hard as that might to be believed. And yes, it is a big style bite of this summer entertainment with spectacular CGI visual and breathlessly paced action set pieces. But it's also, I am going to be dare to say it, smarter than you think it's going to be. Not necessarily cerebral, mind you, but smarter at the storytelling and smarter at the transformations of its characters. Use the term internationally since Sander, who wrote the story and produced, said he feels his movies are smarter than people seem to be give them a credit for being. We seems to be brother him preciously because it does take time to make better movies for an audience that is too often fed lazy products that don't even bother to try even hard to pretend to be smart or worth 2 hours of any one time. Sander has a history of giving us some of the very best films of their respectively genres, from one of the best zombies movie, Dawn of the Dead, to one of the best war and sandal space epics 300 to one of the greatest classic comic book adaptations of all time, Watchmen, and he is delivered another with 300 Rise of an Empire. But while Zack Snyder wrote 300 Rise of an Empire and the course gets credit for the smart storytelling, he did not tell it in the director's chairs this time. That job went to the Noam, and while the director might not have an extensive resume and the Snyder is the master of the cinematic style and imagery that defines the 300 series, prove more than the capable of living up the franchise's standards and shockingly surprising them in many regards. I can't stress enough how remarkable the naval battles are and how well and edited and choreographed the fight sequences play out. Sure, the splatter of blood in slow-mo can feel excessive, but actually the early sense it might get things fades away as it becomes obvious how it fits into the overall feel and approaches to the material everything and everyone gets dirty, messy, sweaty, confused, crowded and covered in filled hair. And it just works. It takes its slick style and covers it with mud and grease and blood, diminishing the gloss until you don't even notice anymore that the camera lens itself is so often dirty. It's like the film crew more combed out with the soldiers and well the equipment was unclean and eventually everything stopped wasting time everything trying to keep it clean. They have taken a movie where everything seems green, second and artificial and figured out how to make it feel expensive and covered in rough coarse grit, giving it an effective sense of realism countering the obvious sense of overthinking artifice. That is no small accomplishment and is the core sort of attention to effect and sensibilities that makes this such an impressive and vastly enjoyable production. The story overlaps the events of 300 rather than merely being a sequel. The film provides backstory leading up to the film 300. Then most of this movie's main story transpires while 300 is taking place elsewhere in the world and finally the climax is set in the immediate aftermath of the Super Bowl small Spartan band. This allows terrify cross-referencing the builds to a thrilling expectations during the final battle, and when it is arrived in improvised moments, what cheering out loud I feel admit I did. Which leads me back to my earlier remarks about Wonder Woman. Folks, all I can say is Lena Heavy and Eva Green are so awesome. It is leaning on how to set impossible high expectations for what Wonder Woman and could should be when he arrives in theaters. Go get it, take copious notes because after this film fans are going to be chomping at a bit to see something this awesome for Wonder Woman. Good news is Zack Snyder and had a hand in crafting those who characters in 300. Rise of an Empire, and he is directing the Man of Steel sequel that will introduce Gadget Wonder Woman, so the chances of that same level of perfection carrying over is significant. I could have reviewed this entire film just by praising Hattie and especially Green. That's how great they are. Green steals the entire movie with a Grant Williams portrayal that managed to be always remind us of reason to sympathize with our situation and respect our power. The only time the film stumbles up during a sex scene that goes on a little too long and goes a little too far in the violence and sexy portrayal to the point it becomes humorous and starts to feel silly. Be aware, just as the film as far movie more violent than this first, there is much more nudity as well as the sex scene makes it clear what's happening each time they graphically shove and push one another into new positions. So if you are easily offended by such things, well, you are gonna be offended, I guess. If you like 300, you are probably going to be really like 300. Rise of an Empire, if you have loved 300, I would wager good money you will love this once as well. But here is the kicker, if you did not like 300, you still might like this film because it's got more character development as a smarter story and it's just programmed to watch and amazingly good. Directed by Noam Murro, written by Zack Snyder and Kurt Johnstedt, adapting the Frank Miller graphic novel Xerxes. To prepare for the sequel to Snyder's 2016 hit movie about the 300 separates at the Battle of Templi, I went back and watched the original 300 one more time. My feelings about it were deeply ambivalent, matching the experience I had the first time. There can be no denying the gorgeous production design of that film. Snyder, for all his problems as a director, has a unifying visual style, and 300, with its stunning sepia tones, sweeping green screen vistas, and amazing slow-mo battle scenes, was not like anything I would ever seen. It has been hugely influential and everything from AMC's subtext to movies like Clash of the Titans, Immortals, and the recent Pampy for its look and Nazism. I appreciated 300, but its politics are abhorrent and enough bad that the once brilliant Frank Miller, who wrote the comic these movies are based on, was well on his way to becoming a right-will Nojito by the time he wrote and did draw the source material here. But the movie goes further. Watching it again, it feels like a Bush-era relic. The optics are terrible. The separateness are white guy, barking about freedom and sacrifice, celebrating their brutal military culture, while the Persians are sexually smartly freaks. Their king comes for as bringing transitive way to foreign those good old boys in Middle America, while Bulger as the Spartan leader in our rigging. Of course, the Spartan also managed to be widely company and homoerotic, especially the teeth-dancing, ab-flexing Michael Fassbender in a pre-starred role, even as they dance the attention to Greeks as boy lovers. The character stuff is humorless and tiresome. For the most part, 300 is a movie for bros who are absent any self-awareness. 300 Rise of an Empire improves on the original in a couple of ways. Structurally, it's interesting in that it's prequel, during sequel, and sequel all in one. It shows what the other Athenians were up to while the 300 Spartans were getting martyred at the hot gates. True, from what I have read, the historical facts are at best loose. Athenian General Themistocles civilian Stapleton generally bland but more interesting than every single one of his Athenian soldiers is fending off the Persian fleet led by Greek turned Persian warrior. He tries to unite the Greek to fight the Persians even approaching Spartan Queen Cargo, but she helped none of it. She just narrates the first minutes of the movies in a reasonably clever, shifting flashback structure while Themistocles wait for the Spartans to sacrifice themselves and do the uniting for him. It's too bad the first half of his movie is so terminally dull, which despite my griefs about that original, it never was. We get the backstory over to Xerxes and Artemisia and a Greek warrior and his son, none of which anyone is likely to care about. The color scheme has gone for sepia in the first film to slate, the blood lesser, scarlet spray and more an oily blueberry syrup in internal slow-mo. And there are some impressive visuals. The 8 years since the last film has made the style. There's little here that feels fresh or fun. Worse, that is the gimmically treaty, a foggy lens conceit, while on the bridge of Artemisia's ship just succeeds in muttering it that much further, and that narration quickly becomes the politics are marginally lost, obnoxious, his time out. Apparently, Greeks are fighting for freedom and democracy while slaves are below decks rowing. Or maybe that was just in the Persian fleet. It's quite hard to tell in all this visual go. Yes, the Persians are still hirsute exotics, but the prominent female leads are given plenty of agency, which makes it feel a bit more balanced. Unfortunately and typically, one of the female leads uses her sexuality to get what she wants, that old thing. But thank the hoary host is forever green. The mid-movie sex scenes she shares with Steph, the best and most entertaining I have seen in Yonks, is also the only time the movie finds a moment of humor. So yes, while I acknowledging the problematic effect from the previous paragraph, I can't say I did not enjoy the scenes and its energy as the combatants lovers slam each other ground. The movie improves as a result of it setting up a much more satisfying third act where at least something happens that feels real. Something is that stack, not just someone's favorite dream. Green is clearly the best thing is this. As she was in the Tim Burton Dark Shadow giving powerful performance that suits the material and raises up all the boring men around her, so to speak. 300 is a movie I have a lot of fondness for. It is the ultimate quest movie, heroic bombast at its finest, and yet not entirely a mindless slot-fest either. Maybe it was not the smartest movie, but it was smarter than it needed to be. And maybe it was not the most heartful movie, but it put more feelings into the story than it needed to. So I was eagerly anticipating the sequel from the moment I heard about it. Of course, it's an old story by now. I missed it in the theater because real life was in the way at the time. But now it's made it to Netflix, so I was finally able to see it. Rise of an Empire takes place mostly concurrently with the events of 300, while the Spartans seek to hold the hot gates and Greek fleet, led by the Athenian general Themistocles, battles the Persian fleet at the Artemisia and Salamis. Naval is the Greek by birth, but with a profound hatred for his homeland, is Xerxes' most royal advisor and most ruthless commander. Over the course of the film, Themistocles and Artemisia war against each other across the open seas, resulting in no end of spectacular and hideously glory battle sequences. Various X-rays was a minor prop in 300. Artemisia has a much bigger role with much greater development, and Eva Green does a decent job as the ruthless femme fatal. However, while much of the same elements are there, I did not find Rise of an Empire as compelling as its predecessor. There is all the same bombast and gloriously absurd violence, but it feels hollow somehow. Part of it, as that Australian Stapleton has none of the charm or charisma of Janet Butler. On the whole, he is just not very convincing as the famed hero of Athens. At least they did justice to Themistocles' brilliance as a tactician. Lena Headey puts in another strong performance as Queen Corgo of Sparta, but her role is too small to have much of an impact on the film as a whole. Also, and I realized this may seem a ridiculous problem to have. It did bother me how many historical inquiries were in the rise of an empire. Don't get me wrong, I know these are not documentaries. I wasn't expecting a perfect adaptations of history. But 300, for all its cartoonish extravagance, stayed surprisingly true to our story of the Battle of Thermopylae. Its biggest departure was the implications that only 300 Spartans fought at the hot gates, when there was also several thousand soldiers from other Greek cities present. Otherwise, you would be surprised how much of 300, including much of its more memorable dialogue, was arrived outright from the pages of history. Rise of an empire takes much greater liberties. Darius did not die by Greek hands, not at Marathon or anywhere else. There was a Queen Artemisia who served in the Persian navy, but the character in the movie bears little resemblance to the historical figure beyond that. Similarly, 300 presented a very rich, if somewhat simplified and exaggerated, depiction of Spartan culture, but rise of an empire does not do the same for the Athenians. They are just random dudes with swords. How did they make a 90-minute movie about Athenian soldiers and not mention the gods Athena once? Thriller was like an enhanced version of history, painted in broad and dramatic strokes to heighten the story. Rise of an Empire is just an action movie loosely based on historical events. Overall rating 6.8 by 10. Rise of an Empire lacks out the spirit and vigor of its predecessor, reducing it to naught but an empty bloodbath. When I saw 308 years ago, I was just a passive bystander of Greekery, but I loved that movie for its styles and bad ways. I did not really have a way to articulate how cool I thought 300 was back then. Now I have a few more tools available with which to geek out, and a sequel called 300 Rise of an Empire to review. Hit the jump to see if Royce is as good as his predecessor. To mark the occasion, I also decided to revisit the original 300 by Zack Snyder a few days ago. I remember being excited to see what Snyder was cooking up at the time. Seeing the great stylistic, visual and distinctive color again helped me remember what I loved about in the first time. The badass group of characters straight out of a graphic novel was just perfect at the time, and the unflinching R-rated gore had me wanting to see more of this fascinating universe. This time around, the 300 lead by have fallen. Greek general Themistocles leads the charge against involving Persian forces led by mortal turned good Xerxes and Artemisia, vengeful commander of the Persian navy. This is not technically a sequel, nor it is the release prequel. This is more of a sidequel. We see Themistocles flight before and after Leon's decide and his men fall at the hot gates. This requires that we see in that and even a scene where it seems like archive footage of him and 300 is a great way to take the previous story and make the universe larger. The standout here is a evergreen green is all that I had hoped for when I saw her characters in the trailer. In her face is the anger and weaknesses against Greece, but still a defense and a longing to be back. Eva Green creates a character that is real, menacing, little and sexy all at once. Her performance is wonderful to watch and quite possibly one of the main reasons you will want to see this. You might be surprised that between two enemies, there is a love story of sorts. Eva Green and Sullivan Stapleton play these scenes so well. They are not dangerous and sexy all at once. The gods that overhear what's happening provides some liberty to a movie that is mostly bereft of it. I have not really seen Sullivan Stapleton in anything before Rise of an Empire, and I can say that he carries himself well. Here is the troubled yet noble Greek fighting for freedom. Freedom is a universe ideal that we can all understand with, and Stapleton plays that well. This is could have easily been overturned with grand speeches, but Stapleton makes us feel that Themistocles act with a heavy burden. He does not have the movie kind of the charisma that Jack Butler had, but still holds his own. I expected that Xerxes would have a much larger role in the proceeding here. He is limited to a small but important part as the son of a Persian king who is killed by him. Damn circles. Xerxes appreciate which more means menacing in the original 300 and much less so here. One of the core parts of the history of the Spartan 300 is the treatment handed to them after being killed by the Persian. I expected more of that to play out still. Xerxes did get to show Leonidas severed he to failing Athens. If you remember the end of 300, Spartan Delicious stood leading a larger army of presumably Greek and Spartans. That scene doesn't seem to be play her, but David is back in a smaller role. Instead of him, the vice-saver is handled by Lena Headey, who played Queen Corgo in both movies, also returning in an important role in Andrew Tiernan, who plays the hunkback. I still see him, and Trick John is under that makeup. The fighting is great here too. You still get to see many of the sticks found in 300 like slow motion kills, blood effects, body parts flying. In many respects, this all feels like an upgrade. I saw this in 3D and I can say that the experience is quite immersive. The blood effects are perhaps a way overboard, but you get a feeling that this red tide is a real and distinct part of battle. This is an unapologetic and hard R. Limbs are lost, hairs come off and are carried around. Mercy is offered to be almost no one, and it shows the person sitting to my right was noticeable sequentially with some of the on-screen blood. So we have a movie that Greek have been asking for, a click unapologetically hard R that does not turn away from showing us the goods. The question remains, will Greeks be out to support this? I liked it. I enjoyed how the world was expanded and the stakes were higher. If happens, I would be happy to see the next chapter of 300. Let's call it 300 Dawn of Democracy Sequeling. While King Leonidas and his 300 partners have their date and destiny at Thermopylae, another battle against the Persians is brewing, this time at sea. Themistocles, Savalian Stapleton as a Greek general sees the threat posed by the god King Xerxes of Persia. He knows that he must unite all of Greece if he is to stand once any chance to repelling the Persian invasion. Even if he accomplishes his mission, Themistocles must still face Artemisia Grain, the ruthless leader of the Persian armada. Review. Let me say something I have no doubt more than a few of you may agree with me on. I think 300 may be one of the best movies since the turn of the millennium. Initially ripped apart by criticised, movie stormed theaters in droves to see it, setting a pre-summer box office record that would stand until the Hunger Games, making actors like Gerard Butler, Lena Headey, and Michael Fassbender household names, and making director Zack Snyder one of the biggest names in action cinema, at least until he became one of the co-conspirators behind the character assassinations of Superman. Overall, thanks to a winning combo of innovative action scenes, hyper-stylized look, intensely quotable dialogue, and a winning combo of bombast and a bravado, 300 remains a true cinematic crowd player, just as good as the day it was released. That said, like any truly successful movie, there came across of limitators ranging from Beowulf to Clash of the Titans, which, with our exception, all provide terrible. Despite dozens of action movies trying to apes its aesthetic, and nearly every sword and sandal film of the last decade trying to emulate it as much as possible, not one managed to recapture that some lightning in the bottle that made 300 such a success. either financially or with fans. That is one of many reasons that should give anyone hoping lightning may strike twist with the long delayed sequel to Rise of an Empire. Ignoring the fact it spent most of the last late years in development hell, the trailers bode ill of this film already were 300 offered a textbook example of a great trailer. I could not tell you anything about the trailers for 300 Rise of an Empire despite having seen it dozens of times. Still, I vividly remember writing off 300 as a shock and a shock snoozer Science City before walking into theaters to have my mind blown away. So I decided to give 300 Rise of an Empire a chance. Time will tell if this is a madness. Should moviegoers prepare for a glory or tonight to do we dine in hell? Join me, my dear readers, as I put its same name to the test as I review 300 Rise of the Empire. In the clash of civilizations that was the Greco-Persian Wars, there are dozens of storied battles and personalities among the histories, among them the famed stand of and 300 Spartans as Thermopylae, the failed gambit for Greece by Persian god King Xerxes and Xerxes, and the clever tactics of Themistocles of Arthur, whose fans and foresight were stunning victorious at Marathon and Salamis is open. Themistocles' shoulders on whom the weight of the all Greece is placed. For even as the Leonidas Spartans fight and die at Thermopylae, and even at Athens burn, his fleet must fend off the Persian navy under the command of Artemisia, lest the rest of Greece meet the fate of Athens. There is a reason that the tales of the Greco-Persian Wars have been told since their Herodotus because and discounting that it marked the birthing pains of the Western world, it makes for some great stories. Part of the strength of 300 was how it drew from the best parts of the collecting mythos and they turned up to the 11 and ignoring much of that same myths is one of the things that makes 300 Rise of an Empire, which seems to be have made the ill-chosen move to the true history under the bus while half-heartedly emulating the more fantastic elements of the original film. It's a pitfall that many other attempt successors fell victim to, in that none of them seemed to be noticed. 300 had a wrinkled self-awareness of its own absurdities. Meanwhile, 300 Rise of an Empire seemed far more absurd while being more grounded. This is made worse by lacking both of the energy and spectacle of the original film. The poor pacing that absolutely drags our time, making 300 Rise of an Empire a remarkable, lifeless film. Yet another glaring weakness of the film is that there has been a major downgrade in terms of cast. Another of the main strengths of 300 was that the performance played out Luca, particularly bombastic Serge Obele, adding to the energy of the film, and a number of standout performances made the careers of several cast members. There is no Gerard Butler or Michael here, and Lena Heavy, David Mayhem, and Rodrigo Senato may show up, but together they have maybe 5 minutes total screen time, leaving the rest of the film largely to a cast who lack the force of presence or personality to carry it. The chief offender is Sullivan Stapleton. One of the latest is a long line of Australian TV actors. Hollywood drafted to headline an action film and clearly proving unready for it. If his middling performance as Themistocles is any indications, he is not in UK Chris Hemsworth. I will give him some credit. I actually remembered his character's name, which is more than I can say for most of the sporting cast. Don't expect to be seeing the next Michael Fassbender or Lena Headey come out of his tragically. The one exception to this could be had in Eva Green, who are the maniacal and bloodthirsty Persian admire. Artemisia seems to be the only Persian in the film putting any effort into her performance. I would say she steals this show, but that's not really a compliment when your closest competition is an who sounds like he is reading for cue cards. Yet even here there are issues. Her character is essentially neutral, Xerxes as a villain, and the liberties taken with her backstory is among the worst example of historical liberties in the film. Finally, we come to the cinematography, and it should not be in an surprise at this point that there is not anything special to see her. Say what you will about Zack Snyder, but there is a reason he became a household name after 300. When it comes to visuals and actions choreography, the man is one of the best in the business, and first-time director Noam Murro proves out of his depth trying to match it. In terms of visuals or action, it more often than not feels like a cheap imitations, and even the naval battles fail to stand out. More often than not, just them seem like little things are missing. One of the most notable is that Tyler Bates' big booming score from the original that mixed guitar, riffs, and classical with effortless has been swapped over a generic score written by DJ. 300 Rise of an Empire may be a proper sequel 300, but it's only the latest in a long failed spiritual successors who lacked what made 300 such a success. While you could point to many factors, 300 biggest factor in its success was how overwhelming it was. Ranging from the memorable script, bombastic performance, stylish look, the booming score, and brilliant action choreography. On the flip side of the coin, 300 Rise of an Empire biggest failing and what ultimately tanks the movie is now underwhelming. It is the plot drag. The performances are, with the exception of Eva Green, entirely lifeless, and in terms of cinematography, it looks and feels like a cheap knockoff. Comparing 300 Rise of an Empire to 300 is like comparing affiliates to the Leonidas as Alto, it as a Spartan. It lacks the heart, the guts, or the glory of the real deal, and ultimately betrays everything that made the previous film stand out. 300 Rise of an Empire is not but a poor in limitations. As bland and disposable as 300 was, memorable and would not have all been better off if this had been tossed off a cliff and discarded. 2006, Zack Snyder directed 300 was a modestly entertaining picture, one that initially garnered great for its innovating style, impressive costuring, and absolute determination to show as much make skin as possible. Based on the Frank Miller graphic novel of the same name, it was an R-rated bloody cheese fest, and while it gets weaker with each subsequent viewing, it was wildly popular when it was released, raking in an impressive $210 million. Despite its success, I do not recall anyone clamoring of a sequel, and yet here we are. Things have changed, of course. For 300 Rise of an Empire, Snyder has vacated the director's chair, content with scribbling out of the screenplay and playing producer. Instead, is helmed by first-timer Noam Murro and based witching anyway on Frank Miller's as of yet unreleased sequel, Xerxes. Obviously, many of the leads from the original film are absent, given how many of them died in the original, returning are Lena Headey as the various Queen Gorgo and Rodrigo Senatro as the god King Xerxes. Also, major role is particularly substantial. This time, the film focuses on both the events leading up to that battle at the Hot Gates as well as its aftermath. It's all about naval battles this time around, drawing on the battles of Artemisia, Thermopylae, and Marathon, and centering on two opposing leaders, Themistocles, the leader of the Greek army, and the Artemisia, Eva Green, the admiral of Xerxes' navy. Its wealthy veers back and forth between the past and present, dealing with the battle where Themistocles killed Xerxes' father, which set off his chain of events, and the two major naval battles where Xerxes True, Artemisia made his final push to try to conquer Greece. I tell you all of this plot not because I want you to think that Rise of an Empire is particularly intelligent or historically accurate, but rather to give you an idea of the scale and scope of its absolutely staggering institute. Historical storytelling is often a fluid endeavor, prone to creativity license and dramatic representation. Yes, this is mangleless any sense of historical accuracy, taking the events as well as the biographies of its players, stomping on them until they are night unrecognizable and the uninterrogating on whatever remains. 300 Rise of an Empire is an absolutely bugfuck crazy part of the horrible, worthless, murky sinkhole of terrible writing, directing, acting, and editing. I could forgive its decision to be vulgarity, secret, soft, and sembleness of historical fidelity if the story that it chose to tell was a fan word. But alas, this is not to be. Instead, it's garbled mess of old men shouting, normal, shirtless heroes giving nonsensical speeches replete with the witty motivational slogans, and bad guys slightly of conquest violently. All of this is supposed to be give the appearance of political intrigue and complexity, except that the story is simple, that you would have to actually be unconscious not to grasp it. There are desperate attempts to be recapture the urgency and instancy of great butlers. This is Sparta or Michael Fassbender's way. Clever then we will fight in the shared moments, but they fall flat, victim to the writing and soulless delivery. Instead, we are treated to the characters doing glitter more than in making obvious trial declarations via shouty imitations of what they think made the original form interesting. But watching Sandro Lord Lily's nothing will stop the march of my empire, and for glory's sake, war or listening to the Stapleton daily clamour about duty and honor and loyalty over and over and over does little more than drive home to the point that you are watching a sad, flaccid imitations of the original. The acting is uniformly abysmal, with Stapleton somehow managing to be both loud and wooden, and Sinatra overacting even more than he did in the original. Had his Queen Gorgo is just Lannister but with less charisma, menace or nonce, and she grits her teeth and stares blankly as she mumbles eye-rolling lines about winds of justice and vegans, yet no one acquired themselves as poorly as Eva Green in a performance that is near historical in the epic terribleness. Green is something of an enigma, capable of great subtitle and intensity of film like cracks and even casino royalty, but sometimes she tries to just sickly smolder her way through a performance, and that's part of what drags her down here. She glowers and struts and cranks her solitary up to 11, doing everything within her power to give the worst performance possible. It's not sided by the characters being written as a complete cartoon, executive her soldiers, and then making out with the several head waggling her fingers and screaming incoherently after an absolutely ridiculous sex scenes or scratching, biting, shrieking exchange that is not even remotely titling. She ends up facing her conjugal partner in battle and screams, "You fight better than you fuck," and the audience literally burst into what can only be called embarrassed giggles. After 7 years of waiting, no one knows if a sequel to 300 would do the business of his predecessor, and no, we have a definitive answer: yes. 300 Rise of an Empire effortlessly took the number one spot at the box office, proving that America still loves shirtless Greeks murdering each other in slow motion. With a $45 million opening weekend, 300 Rise of an Empire could potentially reach the gross of the first film if audiences are kind. It is rare for R-rated films to open this big and spam franchises, but it helps that this uber violent series appeal to both ideas and people who like smartly made idiots movies. Let's see how next weekend treats it. Second place went to Mr. Peabody and Sherman, which opened to $32 million. dollars. The takeaway from this is that any CG animated film movie will open well regardless of how off-putting the marketing is. It's not going to do the Lego movie numbers, but it should be defined in the long run. This thing will have a long life on DVD. Meanwhile, Non-Stop fell to third place after being last week's champion, grossing $1,500 million for a $52 million total. That's bigger drop that anyone involved in the film probably wanted, but the production is already getting pretty close to making a profit. Liam Neeson's acting career lives on. And then we came to the logo movies in fourth place. Thanks to new family movie competition, this was the roughest weekend yet for the film, but it still performed well, grossing $1,100 million for a $2 to $4 million total. Right below it, Sons of God dropped a devastating 60% for $10 million weekend. Well, it would be devastating if the movies was not made for pennies and already made its money back when it's aired on TV. The producers are fine, but their fans have sent them a message. Elsewhere, The Moments Man solidified its sleeper hits status by crossing the $70 million mark. 3 Days to Kill continued to bomb and Ride Along continued to collect pennies. Despite its run pretty much being over, Frozen floored its Oscar success to $393 million, which means that $400 million is inevitable. 1200 as a Slave re-entered the top 10, collecting another $2 million, showing that yes, it does pay to win Best Picture. Fifth update, Monday, 1:30 p.m. The final numbers are in with Grand Hotel pulling in $8,000 for Searchlight to take in a per screen average of $202K plus is on for 4 screens high, and yesterday estimate Warner Bros. And Legendary Pictures 300 Rise of an Empire was on the money with yesterday. Guillaume and Mr. Peabody and Sherman's number were almost in line with yesterday's, while then 10 spot was finally figured out. It went to the right along, not Robocop, but only by a hair. We are keeping in yesterday's chart below for comparisons for those who want to see the difference. For example, Son of God turned 59% instead of 61%, so Sunday numbers were slightly better than expected. Next weekend, openers are Disney's Need for Speed, Lionsgate's trailer Spirit's single Mom's Club, Going Wide, and in limited release will be Focus Features Bad Words. Warner Bros. Allows on VOD and the Weinstein Company's One Chance is the top 20. 300 Rise of an Empire, 3,470 theaters, 3-day queue, 45 million by per screen, $13,006. Mr. Peabody and Sherman's, 3,934 theaters, 3-day queue, $32.2 million by per screen, $8,187. Non-Stop, Uni 3,113 theaters plus 23, 3-day queue, $15.8 million, 45% per screen, $5,085 by total queue, $52.5 million by WK2. The Logo Movie, 3290 theaters minus 480, 3-day queue, 10.9 m minus 48% per screen, $317 total queue to $24.8 million. Son of God, Fox, 3,271 theaters plus 3-day queue, $10.3 m minus 59% per screen, $3,173 total queue for $41.8 million by VK2. Moments Man, Sony, 2001 theaters minus 1001, 3D Cum 3M minus 38% per screen, 153.7 by total cum, $70.5 million by WK5, 3 Day to Kill, 2348 theaters minus 543, 3 Day cum, $3 million minus 39% per screen, $1,282 by total cum, $25.5 million by weekend 3, Frozen DIC, 1660 theaters minus 86%, 3 Day cum, $2.9 million minus 90% per screen, $1,780 by total cum, $392.9 million, weekend 16, 12 years slave, 1065 theaters plus 654, 3 Day cum, $2.51 million plus 116% by per screen, $1,982 million, total cum, $53 million by weekend 21, Ride Along, 1323 theaters minus 546 3 Day cum, $2024 million minus 33% by per screen, $1,532, total cum, $129.99 million, WK8, Robocop, Sony, 1714 theaters minus 117 3 Day cum, $20180 million minus 55% per screen, $178 by total cum, $54.7 million, weekend 4, About Last Night, Sony, 1074 theaters minus 730, 3 Day cum, $1.6 million minus 51% per screen, $1,540, total cum, $46.5 million, WK4, Pompey, Sony, 1658 theaters minus 1.000, 3 Day cum, $1.5 million minus 63% per screen, 961% total cum, $21 million, weekend 3, American Hustle, Sony, 605 theaters minus 340, 3 Day cum, $1 million minus 45% per screen, 10741% total cum, $148.3 million, weekend 13, Gravity, WB, 384 theaters plus 44, Divine Rises, 496 theaters, 3 Day cum, $901K minus 41% per screen, $1,818, total cum, $33 million by weekend 3, The Grand Hotel, 4 theaters, 3 Day cum, $811K per screen, $202,792, weekend 1, The Wolf on Wall Street, 359 theaters minus 146, 3 Day cum, $688K minus 44% per screen, $191, total cum, $115.56 million, weekend 1, Filmonia, TVC, 670 theaters, 427, 3 Day cum, $683K minus 43% per screen, $1020, total cum, $35.9% million, WK16, Das Boys Club, FOC, 312 theaters plus 96, 3 Day cum, $618K plus 42% per screen, $198.4 by total cum, $26.1 million, weekend 19, Fourth update, Sunday, 8:30 am, 300 Rise on an Empire pulled out an estimated $45 million this weekend for Warner Bros. And Legendary Pictures. The film starring Sullivan Stapleton this time is traveling strong around the world now and is off day today, looking at $87.8 million in 58 markets. The budget for this 3D actioner is said to have been $110 and plus, so currently the studio and Legendary has $132.8 million worldwide in just a few days. It's playing equally well between young female and males. Fox remarks Mr. played by Anne Sherman, which has already been playing internationally for weeks, debuted in the States out to an estimated $32.5 million on a $145 million budget. Updated international numbers are $66 million gross in the 52 markets of $28.5 million worldwide. I think with the reviews coupled with the audience response, we will broaden well beyond the family audience, said Fox Distribution's president Jared Non-stop looks to take in about $15.4 million this weekend, Unisys, but others have it higher at $15.8 million. And last week's Venom and Son of God dropped 61% in the second weekend for a cum of $41.5 million. Frozen is still in the top of 10 days weekend on its 16th weekend out, making it the first time since 2002 that any film has done so. The Academy Award winning musical Chicago and the Chicago Set My Big Fat Greek Wedding were last films due to it. And interestingly, Universal which released right along has Sony, MGCM, Robocop rounding out of top 10, but others have it number 10, 11 with right along nailing number 10 spot. Truly, too close to tell until final numbers comment tomorrow. Update 9:58 3 am. Charts now updated with 33-day weekend estimated per distributors. Noteworthy. Now let's talk about the Grand Budapest Hotel. $69,000 to $8,000 on 4 screens for a whopping $192 to $50 to $200K per screen average, making it not only the biggest per screen opening for a live acting film to date, but also the biggest opening weekend over the director Wes Anderson, having surpassed Moon Rising Kingdom $137.49 per opening weekend. The previous live-action record holder was The Monster, which is its limited release made $147 to $60K per its opening weekend. I give a big shout out to the theater owners who gave us this seats this weekend, said Fox Searchlight head of distributions Frank Rodriguez West has a legion of fans. This film has got a great cast and vast force, and people have been waiting 2 years to see a film from him. That great cast includes Ralph Fiennes, Bill Murray, Tilda Swinton, Edward Norton, Adrian Brody, Harvey Keitel, Betty Murray Abraham, Tom Wilkinson, Judge Law, Jude Law, J. Sanders, Owen Wilson, Britty again, Jason, William, Jeff Goldblum, to name a few. For Searchlight is expanding to 65 to 70 theaters in 17 new markets and expansions within its current place in NY and LA. See our especially box office coverage from Brian Books. A big shout out to Fox Searchlight, which is celebrating its 20 years anniversary. This is year what is the hotel phenomenon and the Oscar Best Picture winner 12 years a slave, which is now 9-10 week for a domestic cum of $53.1 million. Congratulations to all our dear. Also, if anyone you saw the full page and in our local newspaper sentence Ragman's claim as being that top grossing movie in the country that need a reality check as its number are actually nowhere on the charts. In small type it says best on screen numbers. Anyone hear of it? Let's see. Last weekend it had a $14K run on 2 screens, and this weekend it had 15 runs and made a blip of $18K of cum of a per screen of only $173. Total gross to date is $49,000, probably barely enough to recover that full page ad. Let me see, where does it rank? 14, number 18, number 20, number. Guys, can I have the top 5 charts? Oh no, it's not. Here is the either top 100 charts. Anyone? Oh wait, there is a number 68 updated chart. 300 Rise of an Empire. 3470 theaters, $17.5 million Friday, $16.2 million Saturday, $11.2 million Sunday, 3-day cum $14.5 million per screen, $13,006 million WK1, Mr. Amsterdam Fox, 3,936 theaters, $8 million Friday, $14.4 million Saturday, plus 85% by $10 million Sunday, minus 40% 3-day cum, $32.5 million per screen, $8,268 week 1, non-stop Unia 3 theaters, plus 23, $4.7 million Friday, $7.1 million, minus 22%, $4.2 million Sunday, minus 40%, 3-day cum, $15.3 million, minus 45% per screen, Force $3,940. Total cum $52.1 million. Weekend 2. The Lego Movie 3 to 90 theaters minus 48 for 80%. $2.5 million Friday. 5.1 million Saturday plus 104%. $3.3 million Sunday minus 35%. 3-day cum $11 million minus 47% per screen. 3,345 total cum to $2.4 million. Weekend 5. Son of God 3,271 theaters plus 11. $2.68 million Friday. $4.1 million Saturday plus 56%. $3.1 million Sunday minus 25%. 3-day cum $10 million minus 61% per screen. $3,058 million total cum $41.49 million. Weekend 2. Moments Man Sony 2001 theaters minus the 1001. 870K Friday. $1.4 million Saturday plus 69%. $760K Sunday minus 44%. 3-day cum $3 million minus 87% per screen. $1,549 total cum $70.6 million. When 300 was released in 2006, it was a crazy, bloody music muscles that was endless, quotable. This is Sparta and had that sex standard signature style that we have come to recognize. It took even 7 years for a sequel, and by damn Sandler was out and a new director was in, but that did not mean it was going to be any less bold. 300 Rise of an Empire attempted to keep up the pace of original while taking quite a bit more history that its predecessor 300 had less to deal with, but 300 Rise of an Empire took on much of the Persian Wars. The question is, how much did they get right? 300 Rise of an Empire was written by Zack Snyder but directed by Noam Murro, a man with only one directing credit to his name prior to this film. This meant he was largely at the mercy of Snyder and his fellow producer. The film feels that way. Yes, if saw 300 and said, we just need to do that, but more in typical sequel fashion. This film is largely concerned with naval battles between the Greeks and Persians. It seeks to portray a good portion of the Greco-Persian Wars, which by no means an easy feat. Consider the fact that this film bookends the original with Sparta and their actions referenced during the middle and end of the film. However, they are not the main thrust of the film. They do make appearances much like the original. This film starts with the story being told to the Spartan troops. Queen Corgo, wife of Leon, explains the origin of Xerxes, the original baddie from 300. It turns out that he was the son of the great Persian king Darius when his father was killed by the Greek hero Themistocles at the Battle of Marathon. Xerxes was urged by his father's greatest general Artemisia to journey into the desert and become the god king. He does this and become a tool of Artemisia. She wishes revenge on the Greeks and shows Xerxes that in his new form he can conquer the world. They do this by bringing their forces on thousands of ships across the ocean to attack the Greeks. In Athens, the various politicians are fighting about whether to fight the force of Xerxes or offer him to Jew in the hopes that he will stand or down or at the very least allow them to live. Themistocles argues that he must fight negotiable with transit. Give me one example when it has ever profited a nation. Themistocles, when they do decide to fight, it is their own ships, but Themistocles first heads to Sparta to ask for assistance. However, this is where the two films overlap, as he is always attempting to convince the oracles to allow him to fight. Queen Corgo tells that the Spartans will now join them as Spartans. The ideologies do not quite line up with those of Athens. Themistocles lives assuming these Greek forces are on their own. When the Battle of Artemisia begins, the Greeks fight like mad. They attack the Persians by ramming the ships and then tricking portion of the fleet into an ambush, a movie that Artemisia finds impressive and which gives her a chance to offer Themistocles a role on the Persian side. If he will defect and work side by side with her being the hero, he politely declines. The rest of the film shows the various sea battles, the news of the Spartans' death of Thermopylae, and the sacking Athens by the Persian army. However, at the Battle of Slam, Queen Gorgo arrives at what feels like at least minute with a horde of Greek ships. The film ends the Gorgo and her army attacking by Persian, while Xerxes seems to have given up naval forces, concentrating instead on his march across Greece. The first thing to note that is many of the characters and battle portrayed in this movie actually exists. This question, however, is whether the movie portrayed things accurately and lets us face it. Zack Snyder is not trying for realism. That being said, let's look at the Greco-Persian War and what the movie at least attempted to cover. Queen Gorgo of Sparta was a real person. She lived around 480 BC and was, in fact, the wife of the king Leonidas. She was the daughter of Leonidas, half-brother and king of Sparta. Themistocles was also real. He was an Athenian general who believed in the will of the people over the will of the nobility. Themistocles was a brilliant tactician and was much beloved by his people. Xerxes was also a real person and the son of King Xerxes the Great. However, he was not a god king, nor was he 8 foot tall. He was a normal man with a singular focus. Xerxes was a decisive ruler who crushed his way across Greece and into Europe. Thought he was eventually pushed back to Persia, where he was eventually assassinated by his own bodyguards. Artemisia was the real person who was the queen of the Helicarnassus, a Greek city-state. She also fought for Xerxes and was one of the favored naval commanders. The Battle of Marathon, Salamis, Artemisium, and Marathon were all very real battles that decided the fate of thousands of Persians and Greeks. One of the battles that stands out in the film, the Battle of Salamis, the battle was real and fictionalized in the film to a degree, but Themistocles a huge victory by tricking a large portion of the Persian fleet into the strait, allowing the Greek to corner them and attack. It was a huge point in the war and stopped the Persian fleet in its tracks. Xerxes was also able to snag Athens, burning it to the ground and scattering its people. This was known as the destructions and was part of the Second Persian invasion. It occurred in 48 BC and took place just before the Battle of Salamis. It was for the reason that Xerxes elevated Artemisia because she was the only one to remark that he not engaged in the battle as Salamis, saying, therefore, much of 300 Rise of an Empire is taken from fact, although it is a Snyder's style that makes much of the situation feel overwhelmingly fictional. The film ends with the armies finally coming together in a final moment of brutality. However, Athens had already been sacked. Leonidas was dead, and Xerxes was well on his way to conquering for more than he may have hoped. The film exists largely to show the lesser strength of naval force on both the Persian and Greek sides. These ships, known as the Thermes, did have sails but were also rowed by upwards of 8-9 men. They were large enough that they could withstand impact. However, the actual battles are subverted by a large storm and choppy seas that took out nearly a third of the Persian fleet. These types of unforeseen circumstances had a large impact on historical battles that often do not hold the same interest in a film. 300 Rise of an Empire fantasizes what these generals and soldiers think, adds intrigue where there may not have been any, and fills in the gaps that people like Herodotus may have changed to suit the epic tales of their triumph. The film hits many of the real points, but in the end, it's still a part of the Zack Snyder school of filmmaking. 300 Rise of an Empire tells the story of the Greek army commander Themistocles in his battle against the Artemisia Green and the Persian army. Throughout the film, Themistocles proves to be a great fighter and leader. His skills are significant enough that some even questions if he is a part god, to which he never gives an outright answer. While the film draws inspiration from historical events like the Battle of Salamis, it takes liberties with the narrative for dramatic effect. These cinematic references mean leaving Themistocles' fate open-ended, allowing for interpretation rather than strict adherence to historical accounts. 300 Rise of an Empire it is a sequel to standard hit 300 from several years prior. However, unlike the traditional sequels, the film has storylines concurrent with its prequel.